Vayikra chapter 13. Yehovah said to Moshe and Aharon, if someone develops on his skin a swelling, scab, or bright spot which could develop into the disease Zarat, he is to be brought to Aharon the Kohen or to one of his sons who are Kohanim. The Kohen is to examine the sore on his skin. If the hair in the sore has turned white and the sore appears to go deep into the skin, it is Zarat. And after examining him, the Kohen is to declare him unclean. If the bright spot on his skin is white, but it does not appear to go deep into the skin, and its hair is not turned white, then the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine him again, and if the sore appears the same as before and has not spread on the skin, then the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 more days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine him again, and if the sore has faded and hasn't spread on the skin, then the Kohen is to declare him clean. It is only a scab, so he is to wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab spreads further on the skin after he has been examined by the Kohen and declared clean, he is to let himself be examined yet again by the Kohen. The Kohen will examine him, and if he sees that the scab is spread over his skin, then the Kohen will declare him unclean. It is Zarat. If a person has Zarat, he is to be brought to the Kohen. The Kohen is to examine him, and if he sees that there is a white swelling in the skin which has turned the hair white and inflamed flesh in the swelling, then it is chronic Zarat on his skin, and the Kohen is to declare him unclean. He is not to isolate him because it is already clear that he is unclean. If the Zarat breaks out all over the skin so that as far as the Kohen can see, the person with Zarat has sores everywhere on his body from his head to his feet, then the Kohen is to examine him, and if he sees that the Zarat has covered his entire body, he is to pronounce the person with the sores clean. It is all turned white, and he is clean. But if one day inflamed flesh appears on him, he will be unclean. The Kohen will examine the inflamed flesh and declare him unclean. The inflamed flesh is unclean. It is Zarat. However, if the inflamed flesh again turns white, he is to come to the Kohen. The Kohen will examine him, and if he sees that the sores have turned white, then the Kohen is to declare clean the person with the sores. He is clean. If a person has on his skin a boil that heals in such a way that in place of the boil there is a white swelling or a reddish white bright spot, it is to be shown to the Kohen. The Kohen is to examine it. If he sees that it appears to be more than skin deep and its hair has turned white, then the Kohen is to pronounce him unclean. The disease of Zarat has broken out in the boil. But if the Kohen looks at it and doesn't see any white hairs in it, and it isn't more than skin deep but appears faded, the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 days. If it spreads on the skin, the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is the disease. But if the bright spot stays where it was and has not spread, it is the scar of the boil, and the Kohen is to declare him clean. Or if someone has on his skin a burn caused by fire, and the inflamed flesh where it was burned has become a bright spot, reddish white or white, then the Kohen is to examine it, and if he sees that the hair in the bright spot has turned white, and that it appears to be deeper than the skin around it, it is Zarat. It has broken out in the burn, and the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is a sore from Zarat. But if the Kohen examines it and sees no white hair in the bright spot, and it is no more than skin deep but looks faded, then the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine him. If it has spread on the skin, then the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is a sore from Zarat. But if the bright spot stays where it was and has not spread on the skin but appears faded, it is a swelling due to the burn, and the Kohen is to declare him clean, because it is only a scar from the burn. If a man or woman has a sore on the head or a man in his beard, then the Kohen is to examine the sore. If he sees that it appears to be deeper than the skin around it, with yellow, thin hair in it, then the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is a crusted area, a Zarat, on the head or beard. A Zarat of the head or beard. If the Kohen examines the diseased crusted area and sees that it appears not to be deeper than the skin around it and without any black hair in it, then the Kohen is to isolate for 7 days the person with the diseased crusted area. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine the sore, and if he sees that the crusted area hasn't spread, that it has no yellow hair in it, and that the crusted area is not deeper than the skin around it, then the person is to be shaved, except for the crusted area itself, and the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 more days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine the crusted area, and if he sees that the crusted area has not spread on the skin and does not appear to be deeper than the skin around it, then the Kohen is to declare him clean. He is to wash his clothes and be clean. But if the crusted area spreads after his purification, then the Kohen is to examine him, and if he sees that the crusted area has spread on the skin, the Kohen is not to look for yellow hair. He is unclean. But if the crusted area's appearance doesn't change and black hair grows up in it, then the crusted area is healed. He is clean, and the Kohen is to declare him clean. If a man or woman has bright spots on his skin, bright white spots, then the Kohen is to examine them. If he sees that the bright spots on the skin are dull white, it is only a rash that has broken out on the skin. He is clean. If a man's hair has fallen from his scalp, he is bald, but he is clean. If his hair has fallen off the front part of his head, he is forehead bald, but he is clean. But if on the bald scalp or forehead there is a reddish white sore, it is zaharat breaking out on his bald scalp or forehead. Then the Kohen is to examine him. If he sees that there is a reddish white swelling on his bald scalp or forehead, appearing like zaharat on the rest of the body, he is a person with zaharat. He is unclean. The Kohen must declare him unclean. The sore is on his head. Everyone who has zaharat sores is to wear torn clothes and unbound hair, cover his upper lip, and cry, "Unclean, unclean." As long as he has sores, he will be unclean. Since he is unclean, he must live in isolation. He must live outside the camp. When zaharat infects an article of clothing, whether it be a woolen or a linen garment, on the threads or the woven in parts of either linen or wool, or on a hide or item made of leather, then if the stain on the garment, hide, threads, woven in parts, or leather item is greenish or reddish, it is an infection of zaharat and is to be shown to the Kohen. The Kohen is to examine the stain and isolate the article that has the infection for 7 days. On the 7th day, he is to examine the stain. If the stain is spread on the garment, threads, woven in parts, or leather, whatever its use, the infection is a contagious zaharat. The garment is unclean. He is to burn the garment, threads, woven in parts of either wool or linen or item of leather having the infection, for it is a contagious zaharat. It must be burned up completely. But if, when the Kohen examines it, he sees that the infection has not spread on the garment or in the threads, woven in parts, or leather item, then the Kohen is to order that the article having the infection be washed and isolated for 7 more days. The Kohen is to examine it after the stain has been washed, and if he sees that the stain has not changed color, then even though the stain has not spread, it is unclean. You are to burn it up completely. It is rotten, no matter whether the spot is on the outside or on the inside. If the Kohen examines it and sees that the stain has faded after being washed, then he is to tear the stain out of the garment, leather, threads, or woven in parts. Maftir. If it appears again in the garment, threads, woven in parts, or leather item, it is contagious, and you are to burn up completely the article that had the stain. But if the infection is gone from the garment, threads, woven in parts, or leather item that you washed, then it is to be washed a 2nd time, and it will be clean. This is the law concerning infections of zaharat in a garment of wool or linen, or in the threads, or the woven in parts, or in any leather item, when to declare it clean and when to declare it unclean.